Welcome back, ladies and gents. We're here at the Open Peace podcast. We are joined by Kane Kowalski, and we have a very special guest today. Rudy Rochman is with us. Rudy, you're a well-known Jewish and Israel activist. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you've been up to?
Well, many things. I fight against anti-Semitism. I try to empower the younger generation of Jews and allies for us to be able to write the next chapter of our history in a better way, for us to move forward. I focus in Israel on uniting the different sectors of Israeli society, from the right to the left, religious and secular, along also with working between Israelis and Palestinians for us to be able to also create a reality here that is on one land, but that all of us can be able to live to our fullest aspirations. I work a lot on creating content, whether that's debate videos or explanatory videos. Right now, I'm working on a project on the Jews in Yemen that were just taken out in our refugees in the UAE, our honored guests in the UAE. And soon I'll be going to Africa to do a documentary on the lost tribes of Jews. So my overall mission in life is to help Am Yisrael rise up and move forward.
That's amazing, man. That's really cool. And you mentioned the Jews from Yemen and going to Africa as well. So, people might not know, but there are Jews from many countries all over the world and very scattered communities. How did you find it getting in contact with these people and managing to make the connections that you have?
Sure. So I would say actually that all Jews are actually from one country, which is Israel, but we've all had different diasporic experiences that we were displaced and lived, some of them for thousands of years. For example, the Yemenite community has been there since King Solomon, so 3,000 plus years. So we've had extended experiences in the diaspora, but our collective origin, whether that's culturally, historically, linguistically, even genetically, is from Israel. Now, when it comes to the Yemenite Jews, as we all know, those in the Jewish community that are familiar with the Yemenite story, most of them have made Aliyah, have moved to Israel, some other places in the world. And there were very few left. And so the few families that were left were now taken out of Yemen because they were facing immense persecution and discrimination and so on. And they were taken into the UAE, and some of them into Egypt. And they're honored guests in the UAE. They're being treated amazingly. It was hard to find them because they're very low key and they don't want to be known. They don't want to be disturbed. They don't want media to come and to make their story into something, they just want their own privacy. But since we came to them and we showed them that, we're family, we're other Jews that want to tell their story for Jews to know what's going on with them, what they went through in Yemen. So they were very open to us once we explained who we were, and they shared their story. Currently, there are 5 Jews left in Yemen. One is in prison. His name is Levi. He helped a family come out with a Torah to Israel, and because of that, he's in prison being tortured. So we need to bring light to that story. And there's a elderly couple, and then there's another 2 younger, middle-aged individuals that are there still in Yemen, and B'ezrat Hashem, they'll be able to get out as soon as possible. But the rest are, that have just gotten out are either in London, in Egypt, or in the UAE. In terms of the African Jews, or the Jews with African experience, the way that I got into finding out about their story was actually while I was a student at Columbia. I met a woman who came to the Chabad house giving a gift to the Chabad rabbi with this very unique and looking kippah. It was round on top, but flat on the side, so it wasn't this perfectly round shape. And it had a big Magen David, but the Magen David was filled in, so it was a very unique design that I had never seen, and clearly was handmade. It wasn't something made by a machine. So I asked her, what is this kippah? I'm fascinated by everything and anything Jewish. I have to know the story behind this. Is it like a special person? Is it a special custom? And she shows me these pictures on her phone. And she's like, oh, look, I came back from Uganda, and here are some Jews from Uganda. And black Jews in Uganda, and look at the pictures, and I see them in their hut-like villages. And one of the huts it has a Magen David on it, which clearly resembles the synagogue. And they're wearing tefillin and they have talit. And I see videos of them doing the hamotzi and different things. And I'm like, what? How is it that I don't know that these Jews exist? I did the army right out of high school, enlisted as a lone soldier, volunteered. I came to Columbia specifically to fight against anti-Semitism and to fight for the Jewish people. And I'm not even aware of the existence of Jews in Africa, besides the South African Jews, besides the expats, and besides the Ethiopian story. How is it that I don't know? And so the feeling I had, if I had to give an explanation to how I felt in the moment, then I was 24. It's as if you turned 24 and you found out that you had a sibling your entire life that you never knew. And all of a sudden you find out that you have this sibling and you have this, like, first of all, shock. And then it's like, okay, how do I catch back up on the relationship? How do I, catch back up on the time and build that relationship with that person? So immediately I dove into research mode. And when I went into research mode, I found out that there were Jews in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Zimbabwe, in Tanzania, Madagascar, Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, really everywhere in Africa, each with different stories. It's not one story. It's different stories, different origins, different experiences. Some converted to Judaism generations ago. Some still have a genetic trait. They have the Cohen gene in some of them. So they all have very unique stories, but they're all part of Am Yisrael, because at the end of the day, either you descend from Am Yisrael, that makes you a Jew, or you join Am Yisrael. And joining Am Yisrael means you adopt the identity, the culture, the way of life, the history, the future, the aspirations, the suffering that comes along with being a Jew. And if you get to that level, that's what becoming part of Am Yisrael is. And from my experience, I haven't been there yet, but we're going there soon. But after speaking to them for over a year now, I can tell you that they really, really are connected deeply, deeply with Jewish souls and are part of Am Yisrael. There's many fascinating stories that they have, and we plan to uncover them to show them to the rest of the world. And that's season 1. Season 2 will be in Asia. Season 3 in South America and Central America.
Oh, wow.
And then we have many others planned down the line.
Amazing. So you did post a video where you met an African gentleman. Was he from Nigeria?
He was Igbo from Nigeria.
Igbo from Nigeria, right? Yeah. And it was a very touching video. I thought it was amazing when the guy realized that you knew about his people, and that was really amazing. But what I saw, unfortunately, was that there seemed to be a lot of comments from people that said stuff kind of insinuating that this is some sort of gimmick that you're doing now, rather than like someone said, like, leave this kind of line of reporting alone, or something stupid like that. And I thought they probably just don't understand who they are and what the story is. Do you think that's what it is, or is there something else behind that?
I think naturally, as human beings, we have this in-group and out-group type of thing. So for Jews that have been traumatized for thousands of years, and their idea of what Judaism was very linear, was one thing, and all of a sudden they're being told that no, there's a bunch of other Jews with different experiences and different colors. It's hard sometimes to grasp, and sometimes the first initial reaction is, well, how do you know that they're Jewish? You need to prove it to me. Like, you need to prove to me that they're Jewish. The Ethiopian Jews, we went through the process. Now they need to prove their Judaism. And my response to that is, what if they came home first? And what if they told the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi and the Mizrahi Jews, like, no, you need to prove your history. You need to prove your lineage. You need to prove the passing down of the teachings. Would we accept that? Would we want to convert? Would we go through the process? No, we would not accept that of them. So I'm not saying we need to open the door for anyone that says that they're Jewish to just accept them being Jewish. But when you look at the facts, for example, the Lemba are people that the word Lemba already in the local language, it means a people traveling with heavy luggage. They're based in Zimbabwe and in South Africa. And they're black-looking Jews. And they have several tribes. And one of their tribes are called the Buba. And the Buba are sort of like the priest tribe. So they're responsible for the circumcision on the 8th day, for things of Nida. They do very Mosaic Abrahamic traditions. And there's these Jewish geneticists at Columbia University that decided to go to Zimbabwe and to do a genetic test on the Buba to see if maybe they have the Cohen gene, which is the Y haplotype on the paternal line. And they did the test, and they found out that they have the same percentage of Cohen gene as any other Cohen in the world. So now it's scientifically and biologically proven that they actually descend from the same people that we do. Does that mean that the Lemba story is the same story as the Igbos and the Abayudaya and others? No, they all have different stories. But it's a fact that a lot of them actually do descend from us. And those that don't, maybe they went through the right process of joining us. For example, the Igbos, which is the person that I met in Finland. We were doing interviews on the street asking people their opinions. And when I asked him his opinion on Israel, he revealed that he was from Africa, and I knew he was Igbo. And for him, like you said, it was very emotional for him to finally have that recognition, because they know exactly who we are, but we have no idea who they are. So the reason our documentary filmed is actually called We Were Never Lost is because I had a conversation with some of the Igbos, and they were getting very emotional that I was giving them recognition, and I got emotional too. And I said, I can't wait for the world, especially the Jewish people, to find out who the lost tribes are. And they're like, Rudy, we love your project, but we have to let you know that the term lost tribes to us is a bit offensive. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, there's this concept of lost tribes, and that would be you. He's like, no, that's in your narrative. To us, we were never lost. Maybe to you, we were lost, but we were never lost. So that's when I realized that the idea of lost tribes is they were lost to the consciousness of the Ashkenazim, the Sfaradim, the Mizrahim, but to themselves, they always knew who they were. And there's even writings of priests that came from Europe and that traveled to Africa to convert people to Christianity 500 years ago, 600 years ago. And they got to Nigeria before the world became modern, before there was technology like we have today to be able to communicate as easily as we do. Before Israel obviously was recreated, so long before that. And he writes, these priests writes in their journals that they come to Nigeria and they're witnessing hundreds of thousands of people practicing Judaism, doing circumcision on the 8th day, and doing all these things that are Jewish culture, Jewish customs. And so, you ask yourself, it's like, okay, well, here's actual historic proof that it's not just something that's brand new, that they just woke up and decided, yeah, like we want to be Jewish or we want to move to Israel. This is clearly something that's been going on for, at least 500-600 years in Nigeria. But obviously it didn't come out of nowhere that hundreds of thousands just picked up one day, started practicing Judaism. It had to have come from somewhere. So where exactly did it come from? Well, it's our job to uncover that. We know with the Lemba that they actually descend physically from Am Yisrael and the others. It's time to actually bring light to their story. And that's the goal of this project. And for me, for the people that say, what are you wasting your time? I think saving one Jew is like saving the world, or saving one human being, in fact, is like saving the world. So for me, if I can bring light and reconnect hundreds of thousands of Jews back to the greater collective, that's a huge thing that I can be able to look back in my life towards the end and say, this is something that I was able to use my time in this world to bring better to this world.
Absolutely. I really like that. I like the idea of uniting and bringing people together, Rudy. I think it's fantastic, to be honest with you. I wanted to ask you, really, we kind of have some internal issues. It's not really a hidden thing here within Israel between all the different kind of sectors and different ideologies. I was wondering what your thoughts are on how we can find internal peace here within Israel and within the wider Jewish diaspora as well, with regards to all the different ideologies from, ultra-Orthodox to Reform to conservative to all these kind of different aspects and ways of practicing Judaism. What are your kind of thoughts on that, Rudy?
Yeah, so I think for the past 2,000 years that our civilization was last destroyed, we didn't only go through a physical form of colonization where our land was taken, renamed, we were slaughtered, enslaved, persecuted, expelled. We didn't only go through that type of colonization, we also went through psychological and spiritual colonization. And what I mean by that is we started to speak creoles of Hebrew, so Ladino or Yiddish. We started to dress like other peoples, wearing black suits like the Poles, or wearing fur on your head like the people that were being forced to do that. We started to speak differently, we started to act differently, and it's natural because that's what happens when you're living for so long in another place. You start to become like the other people. This whole division of Orthodox, conservative, and Reform is so ridiculous to me because it exists only in the Ashkenazi world. If you look at all the other Jews, Mizrahi, Sfaradi, or the Jews in Africa, whatever it is, none of them have this division. And actually, you ask yourself, well, where are these words Orthodox, conservative, and Reform even from? Where does this even stem from? And it's actually from the church. The church divides itself that way. The Orthodoxy, the Reform, the conservative. And so we actually implied and took the way that the church divides themselves and applied it to the Jewish people, which is a form of like spiritual and cultural colonization of our own identity. So I think we need to reject this whole concept of conservative, Reform, and Orthodox. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. Every single Jew connects in their own way to the greater power. Some people love to pray. Some people don't. Some people meditate instead. Some people do good deeds in order to connect to Hashem. Some people, have a mission. Some people teach. There's many ways of spreading light to this world, and also that way is also not, stagnant, because you evolve as a person yourself. What could have worked for you 15 years ago may not necessarily work for you today, may not work for you in 15 years. And so the point of Judaism, of Torah, is for each individual to find their connection to this oneness of the world, which we call Hashem, and to be able to connect to it in order for them to use that to make them a better person and to serve that greater world and that greater oneness better. And that's why we're called Israel. That's actually my Hebrew name also, Israel. And so Israel is a name that Yaakov gets after he wrestles with the angel. Now, why aren't we called the nation of Abraham? Why aren't we called the nation of Isaac? Why aren't we called the nation of Jacob? Why Dafka Israel, which is the second name of specifically Yaakov? Because Abraham finds the idea and is able to create a movement that we need to reject idols and we need to accept the oneness. Isaac doesn't challenge, doesn't help it grow, just takes what his father gave to him and passes it down. He's not necessarily such a revolutionary person. But Yaakov, once he goes past the level of being Yaakov and goes to becoming Israel, he challenges it. He doesn't challenge it in a negative way. He doesn't reject it. He doesn't say, I don't like it. He's like, I want to dig deeper. I want to go higher. And so the whole idea of wrestling with an angel and climbing a ladder, it's not a physical angel with wings that he's there wrestling and then there's an actual ladder that he's climbing. He's wrestling with the concept of Hashem in order for himself, on his own way, to be able to get up, reach that higher level. And that's why we're all called the nation of Israel, because we all have to do that as individuals on the micro level and as a collective on the macro level in order to serve a purpose. Now, there's other divisions like the Ashkenazi and Sfaradi, and that's not who we are. That just describes our experience in diaspora. So we have to be clear that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. And yes, some of us had experiences elsewhere and we picked up some things along the way. And sometimes there are great things that we picked up. Like, for example, Mimuna. It's something that I think is a very positive thing. There are many positive things that Jews have picked up in their different experiences. We don't have to reject everything, but we do need to have a conversation around it. So I think the analogy I heard that explains this best by a personal friend of mine said once that in this conversation, we have to give a sort of analogy to imagine if you had a Mexican family that is all of a sudden colonized by a Japanese family. And the Japanese army is there and they're imposing the law on the Mexican family, and they change their food from things that are usually more corn-based to fish and sushi and noodles and different things that are more from the Asian continent. And they change the artwork from their artwork to things that are more Japanese, and they change their Mexican music to Japanese music, and they change up their furniture. They change up their entire house and their entire way of life. Now, this Mexican family has children, and the daughter is 5 years old. Now, 13 years later, after living for 13 years, the majority of her life as sort of a Japanese person, because she's living with Japanese culture, food, language, music, furniture, and so on, the Japanese leave. So 13 years after 5 years old, she's 10 years old. She's a teenager, she's a young adult. She's finally ready to start her life. And the Japanese family leaves. And now her family has to have a conversation. Now that they left, do we go back to who we were? Do we put back our artwork? Do we change the language? Do we eat our food again? Or do some nights we eat sushi because we really like it, and some nights we eat Mexican food? And the furniture, let's move the sofa back there because that's the way that our culture has our sofa located. But actually the table, we didn't even think about it. That's actually a much better place for the table. So yeah. I'm not saying we have to go all the way back. I'm saying we need to now have a conversation of decolonization and understanding where do we need to move forward that works for the collective. Now, in that collective, there are many different sectors, like we said, Ashkenazi, Sfaradi, Mizrahi, and others, but there's also the left and the right, and the religious and the secular. And we have to understand that these are all pieces of Am Yisrael, and they don't contradict each other, because you look on the right, what does the right of Israel really care about? They care about identity, and they care about security, and they care about the land. That's what's important to the right. And you look at the left, not the left people in politics, but those voting to the left, right? They care about humanity, they care about justice, they care about minority rights, they care about equal rights. That's what they care about. Do these ideas contradict? Does security and human rights contradict? Does identity and contradict? It doesn't. So we need to understand that we can create or work to create a reality that actually includes all of these things, and understand that today we've become sort of ideological tribes. Like we used to be physical tribes, today we're ideological tribes. And the way for Am Yisrael to move forward is to unite their tribes. And that's the conversation we need to have today. I think the idea of Zionism was to get us to Zion, to Jerusalem. We got there. Now that we have our vehicle and that the driver is in the vehicle, Am Yisrael, we need to find out what is the path that we need to take to the final destination, which we know is supposed to get us to this idea of Mashiach, where this world is united and fixed. What do we go there that works for us to be able to do what we're supposed to do in this world?
Okay.
I mean, I see how it doesn't contradict in the sense that, you know, some of the things that the left want and right want, everybody wants. But the fact is here, Rudy, you know, if you look at it, we're in fourth election cycle, maybe going into a fifth. We don't really know. There's kind of a lot of tension here politically, and the left and right are very divided here. I don't want to say it's not as as bad as in the US, but it's not great, you know, it's not great. And I think somebody like yourself, you know, who is a prominent activist for Israel and Jewish activist, you can do a lot of work getting people from the left and from the right to kind of come to some kind of middle ground and understand that the two ideologies, even though politicians want to polarize, we can see eye to eye on a lot of different issues, and I think that's, you know, a lot of your work and stuff that you're putting out there can really help people that are very polarized at the moment. What do you think, you know, the average Israeli can do to minimize the polarization and kind of the radical scenes we're seeing in Jerusalem recently? It's very, very sad, and, you know, these kind of things going on. What do you think we can do?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's plenty of division, and I think the way that we established the society and government is also built for division. The parliamentary system is built to create small little parties and for them to compete between each other, rather than saying, okay, this is important for me, this is it for you, how can we get there together? Like this whole idea, for example, there's been a big debate that kind of stopped with Corona of public transportation on Shabbat. I'm sure all of you in Israel heard this as a big debate. And the religious side says, well, we don't want there to be public use of transportation and funds for transportation on Shabbat because we're a Jewish country and on Shabbat we're supposed to not use those things. Okay, that's a valid argument. And on the secular side, it's like, well, maybe I keep Shabbat, but maybe a form of keeping Shabbat is not necessarily not using electricity. It doesn't say not to use electricity in the Torah, and that's maybe your opinion, and I respect. But why should I, as a secular Jew, or another person that doesn't keep Torah at all, or whatever else, have to live by your rules and in your lifestyle? You can live that, you can choose to take it. And they both have valid points. Now, I think the best way is to just find a middle ground. Okay, the people on the religious side have a problem with the transportation being public transportation because the state is supposed to be something that's Jewish and is supposed to value the culture that we have, which part of it is respecting Shabbat. So why don't we open just a private sector on Shabbat and on Chagim for there to be private companies to run transportation? And it's not done by the government. It's not done by the state. It's not the country doing that. It's private companies like any private individual able to open their business on Shabbat if they wanted to, or would be able to take their car and drive if they wanted to. So that gives the possibility for individuals that want to take transportation on Shabbat to take transportation. They have what they need, and it gives the need for the people more on the religious side to not feel that the state is violating things that they feel is deeply Jewish. But the problem is we're not approaching the situations in a way to transcend, to find the holistic truth that includes layers of truth. What we're doing is saying, no, my opinion is more right. No, my opinion is more right. And then they're fighting for so long that they forgot what they were even fighting for, and it becomes all about destroying the other side. And you see that with a lot of things happening in politics around the world, and unfortunately, it's also plaguing us here in Israel. But what individuals can do, and this is a hard question to ask because every individual has a different capability, sees a different problem, has different talents. But I would say that what I think people should do to fix this problem is to shift the culture. We need to change the way we see things. We need to have a sort of ideological revolution within how we see things and create the next chapter of Jewish history. Zion is already done. We return to Zion. Zion is free. Yes, we need access to a Beit HaMikdash. We need to be able to still fix the problems we have in Jerusalem. We need to fix the rest of Yudav Shomron. We need to find a solution that works for all, Palestinians included. And I think a part of the next chapter of Jewish history includes Palestinian liberation within our story for them to be able to live with us in a way that is appropriate, that doesn't violate need and doesn't violate what they need. And we need to start pushing that conversation forward. Now, what can each individual do? The advice that I have for each person is find your talents, find your skills, whether it's graphic design, music, science, public speaking, whatever it is. Find your talent, find the problems that you see, try to gain more skills and additional talents, and apply that to the problems that you see. And ask yourself this question constantly, because as time goes, you'll see new problems, or the problems will evolve, and you'll gain new skills, and you'll be able to change things in different ways. What you could have done while a student in college is different when you have a wife and kids or a husband and kids, right? It's different. It changes what you're able to do. So ask yourself the question, what are the problems that you see around you? What do you have, and how can you apply that in order to make the world a better place?
Absolutely. I totally agree that we need an ideological revolution. I think I've been thinking that for a while now. And it's weird because I think that in the past, it was not always so much about just destroying the other side. I think it kind of used to be that the left would come from their perspective and the right would come from theirs, and they'd put their views on the table and try and figure out what to do about all the problems, but reasonably and listening to each other. And suddenly, maybe not so suddenly, but in recent years, it's become about just tribalism and separating into our groups and wanting nothing to do with the other side other than to abuse them and hate them. So what's the balance, you think, between getting back to that, but not obviously moving backwards and continuing to progress?
Mm-hmm. So you made an interesting point, and it's true. Even like, go back 10, 20 years ago, even in the Knesset, the people on the right, disagree on things for sure. But after that, they would be friends, and they would eat lunch together, and they would, agree on a lot of things. And today you see this like complete division between people, between sides, as if like associating with them makes you less of a person, and you're my enemy. It's not like you have an opinion that also brings value that I may disagree with or agree with in certain things. It's you're the reason why I'm suffering is because of you. And this is a polarization that we see happening in the world, but also in Israel. And I think if we look historically at Israel, in 1948 we had a common vision, we had a common purpose. It was to come back to Eretz Yisrael. Even till 1967, we had a common purpose. It was to be able to free Jerusalem. And since then, there's not really something that's like uniting beyond war. When we're in war, we're united. You see Tzuk Eitan, you see Amud Anan, you see the different operations, you see the war in Lebanon, that we're united. So what is it that we can achieve or get that is greater than just external fighting that is for us, that makes us unite? I think it's finding that greater vision that gives us the objectives of and the needs to all these different sectors. So a vision that includes the needs of the left, that care a lot about humanity, a vision that includes the needs of the right, and also care about humanity. For them, it's also like Am Yisrael and the land of Israel and the identity and the security, those things included. And also the religious that also fulfills our spiritual needs. And for the secular, that fulfills the secular needs, such as business and international trade and in relations with different countries in the world. So we need to create a mission statement from Am Yisrael, and that's not something I can say because I'm not the leader of Am Yisrael. I'm an Indian Jew trying to use my life and the potential that I have to help Am Yisrael move forward. What I can do is to try to spark the conversation, because that answer has to come from all of us. And I'm trying to spark that conversation. And I think it has something to do with doing tikkun olam, helping fix the world, heal the world, and being ol hagoyim, to be a light upon other nations. If we truly had a purpose of using this vehicle called Israel and using it not only to live and like all other nations and to just have a safe place, but to fulfill a purpose that is supposed to help empower other nations for them to fulfill their aspirations and their greatness, which we all have different greatnesses, and for them to be able to do that, I think that would be a mission statement that would, or parts of the mission statement that would be fitting to what Am Yisrael needs to do. And I think that's actually our collective purpose and has always been. And I see the world as a body, and each nation chooses to be different organs or different systems within the body. They can in fact choose 2 organs or 3 organs or half of one and a third of the other. It's up to each nation to choose, or 2 nations can choose one system. There's no proprietary rule as to who does what. And we chose to be the immune system. We chose to do tikkun olam, to heal the body, and to be Ol HaGoyim, to empower the other organs. That's our choice. Another nation can choose that too.
I understand where you're coming from, Rudy. I do think, though, however, before we can take that extra step and go on to Tikkun Olam and Ol HaGoyim and all this kind of stuff, I think we really do have to focus on ourselves here within Israel and the issues that we're facing. Like we're in a 100-year conflict now with our neighbors, the Palestinians, our long lost cousins that we need to try and unite and somehow figure out. And we do have all this, the left, right. I know you were saying earlier, some of the values, they don't contradict, right? But just for example, let's take a political issue like Yehuda Shamron or the West Bank. The left is kind of pushing for a 2-state solution. The right is pushing more towards a 1-state solution. And we have these different ideologies. How can we unite, even though we have such different views on solving our issues? How can we come together and just have some understanding that either this way or this way could be right? There's no right or wrong here.
Right. So I think a lot of people have conclusions because it fits the needs of their values, and it fits the needs of their worldview. But if you give them a new conclusion that includes their values and their needs and their worldview, and is even better to them in their eyes, then they don't go to that original conclusion in the first place. So what I'm talking about in the previous conversation, and part of it is finding that mission statement, which is what I've brought up Tikkun Olam, is to give an option that allows these different sides to transcend their issues and their fights internally with politics. Amil, how old are you?
I'm 32, my friend.
So I'm sure you saw the movie Independence Day with Will Smith.
Sure. I'm old enough.
So in the movie with Independence Day, you can see all these different countries that have their own armies, that have everything, and all of a sudden there's an alien force that comes and attacks, the world. And the reason we're able to fight off the aliens is because they all unite. So, unfortunately, the way that we've been uniting society till now is by having another enemy, a greater enemy than the left and the right, or a greater enemy than those that live within. But I'm saying that there's another way of uniting, of fighting a greater vision, a greater mission statement, a greater objective that actually fulfills the needs of all. And definitely we still need to take care of the internal issues between Israelis and Palestinians, left, right, society monopolies here, the politics here, all sorts of stuff that have to be changed. The service on the phones, which are horrible in Israel, the Wi-Fi, there's plenty of things that have to be changed in Israel. But I think that the smaller issues become bigger issues when there's not something bigger uniting us all.
I like that. I like that a lot, Rudy, and I like the Alien and Independence Day comparison. That's maybe that's what we need. Then we need the aliens to come down and be like, okay. Yeah.
Well, that's Plan B. If we don't get it right, that's Plan B. So let's stick to Plan A.
Okay, we'll stick to Plan A. Like if we really can't get there, and this stuff just keeps rolling on for another 100 years,
we'll hit them up.
We'll hit them up and get that plan in place. Okay, I like it a lot. Rudy, one of the other things that I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about are some of your more, let's say, impactful videos, because that's actually how I caught wind of you, I think a couple of years back when I saw videos online where it was like you versus Nazi sympathizer or versus Israel hater or anti-Semite, this kind of stuff. And I was wondering, what you feel you get out of having these conversations with people that narrative is completely different to your story and how you see things, and what people can learn from these kind of conversations from people with completely different ideologies.
Yeah. So something that a lot of people that watch these videos don't necessarily take into consideration when watching is that when I entered the conversation, I had no idea who the person was in front of me. I had no idea what this person was going to say, what they were thinking. So yeah, when you see the title and you see the thumbnail and you see these things that say Nazi, it gives the impression as if like I'm entering a conversation with a Nazi. And it's like, no, I'm entering a conversation with someone who's screaming things that I'm hearing for the first time against the Jews in Israel. And I'm here to uncover like what's going on. Are you misinformed? Are you an evil person? Are you just, misguided? And I think that there's light, or at least a spark of light within each person, and every person can do tshuva. So I never see a person that's saying horrible things as, let me not talk to him. I always want to go out and reach and to speak, because at the end of the day, and this is something I think everyone needs to hear and to understand, especially Jews in this conversation, that when we go out and we speak to an individual, especially in Galut, it may be the first time in their lives that they hear from a Jew. And it may be the last time in their lives that they hear from a Jew. So in that moment, we have a much bigger responsibility than just fulfilling our own ego of feeling like we won the argument or we insulted that person back. You have a responsibility to represent your collective. We weren't elected, but in that moment, you do represent your collective. So you need to use all your skills that you have, all the knowledge that you have, all the compassion that you have, to be able to communicate your people's story to the person you're speaking to, and then probably many other people that are listening in. Now, when I'm making these videos, there are plenty of people years later, sometimes months later, sometimes even in that conversation, that have changed their minds, that come to me like, wow, like I was actually in one of your videos 2 years ago, you spoke to my campus. And since then, I started looking at your videos and you're actually really right. And I was wrong and I was misguided. And thank you for giving that to me. And if I had never approached that person, maybe nothing would have happened. So there's always a benefit that can happen, if not to the individual, to the people listening, to the millions of people watching the videos. So for me, my goal is to educate, to empower, to enlighten, to wake people up, to build bridges. I'm also learning a lot from those conversations. These different theories out there against Jews, the different tactics. The reason I'm so good at debate is because I've been in so many debates. So I know exactly the tactics that are being used. So a lot of times people are trying to discredit the right of the Jewish people to self-determination in Israel by asking the person they're speaking to, well, where are your grandparents from? Because they know that most of us will say from Morocco, from Poland, from, all different places, Lebanon, Yemen, Lithuania, South America. And so they're expecting us to give that answer. And when we give that answer, it's like, oh, you see, then you're from there. You're not from Israel. You're from that place. And because I already know when they say that, where are your grandparents from? I say, my grandparents are from Israel. Where they were born and where they grew up is different because they were physically displaced from their native homeland. But where we're all from is from Israel. And so I preempt the actual technique that the person is using because I know exactly why they're doing that. And the only way that I learn that is by actually going out there and debating people and learning the different narratives out there. So you learn so much even as an individual from having conversations like that, even how to better connect to other human beings. When you deal with someone that is so angry and so hateful, it makes dealing with other people much easier. So I think that there's a lot of benefit when doing those conversations. For me, my goal of doing those videos is to bring light where there's darkness and to bring education to other Jews that unfortunately, or other individuals, not necessarily Jews, but other people, especially Jews, that were not necessarily educated on how to be Jews in practice. They were taught how to be Jews in theory, how to put tefillin, how to light the candles, how to do Pesach, but not how to be a Jew in the open, in this world that we live in, dealing with anti-Semitism, living as a Jew, being proud and outward as a Jew, fulfilling the purpose as a Jew, not just preserving the idea of being a Jew. And those are the things that I want to try to help give to us, especially the younger generation, and a lot of times those in the diaspora. And that's the purpose of the videos.
Yeah. And I think when I see in the Western world, in America particularly, it seems like the Jews that are there are starting to drift further from Israel. Many of them, at least, are becoming, I guess, like for fear of being ostracized and being thrown in on the pile with the other Jews that are apparently doing all this evil. A lot of them bow to what other people say about us, and I've seen you yourself debate with people like that on campuses. What do you think is going on there that they are turning on their own heritage and their own history? Because surely they must have been taught this stuff growing up, where they come from.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. I would say that simultaneously, I'm noticing a huge growth of people that are very, proud of their identity, that are awakening and learning and trying to connect it on a much deeper level. So that's happening simultaneously. I remember in 2013 when I first started school at UCLA before transferring to Columbia, I couldn't find really much other people being real activists. It was a lot of like the typical, let's talk about the cherry tomatoes, the ways, the drip irrigation. Let's talk about the good things that Israel does. It's the only peace, wanting country in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. And, that just was like very shallow to me. And there needed to be something that was much deeper and that we were strong and we were going out there and fighting the movements against us. And I'm seeing a huge growth in that with especially Gen Z. They're active on TikTok, they're active everywhere. So simultaneously, I'm seeing a huge growth. Now, why is it that so many people, come to these conclusions of being sort of against their own side, right? I don't use the term self-hating Jew. I think that the better term is internalized anti-Semitism, right? Because it's not like they're saying, we want to hate the Jews. So it's not like I want to hate myself. That's not what they're saying. But it's sort of they're internalizing these ideas that comes from people that are anti their own kind. So I wrote a list of 6 reasons why people come to these conclusions, especially from the Jewish side. So reason number 1 is misinformation. There's so much misinformation out there that it's very easy for someone that's not growing up in a Jewish community, growing up necessarily so connected to their own identity, and they're being taught all these bad things from professors, from social media, from the pop culture, and they get to false conclusions. It's definitely playing a role. Disconnected identity is huge. If you yourself don't know who you are, why will you feel the need to like learn about the other side of the narrative when it comes to the pro-Israel side? Why would you feel the need to protect it or to preserve it if you don't know yourself what it means to be a Jew? So I think there's so many people that are very disconnected from their own identity because they haven't been taught, and that's a consequence of mental and psychological colonization that we went through in the diaspora. And then there's another huge thing that is often not talked about is the lack of exposure and education on the Palestinian narrative. And as Jews, in my experience, we can all share our own experiences. I was never taught to hate Palestinians. Nowhere in my education, not from the house, not from school, not from coming to Israel every summer, not from summer camps, was I ever taught that we need to hate, reject Palestinians. But I was also not taught who they were. And I was also not taught what they go through. And I was also not taught anything really about them. It was just like an other, and some of them are in a war with us. That's it. And ironically, when I first started meeting Palestinians was while I was in the army. And all of a sudden, I have interactions with Palestinians that are real human beings in front of me and are living on the same land and love the land like I love the land. And I started seeing a lot of similarities. And so I realized that there's a lack of education on the Palestinian narrative, which causes many Jewish students, especially in the diaspora, to come to college and learn about this people that are going through suffering that is somehow connected to Israel, and they feel lied to. Now, they weren't necessarily lied to, they just weren't told the whole story, but that doesn't mean something wrong was told to them, but they feel lied to, and so they reject everything else. And so I think if there was a healthy conversation and education within Jewish spaces, teaching them about who Palestinians are, what that culture is, what they've been through, what they want to achieve, bringing Palestinians to come speak so that they can actually interact and demystify this idea of Palestinians to them. I think that would be a huge solution. And there's 2 more. The 5th reason is social pressure. You come today to a college campus or to an intellectual space, and there's these, coalitions built between the students of color and Hispanic students and Native American students and the LGBTQ plus students, and including with the anti-Israel group. And if you want to be pro-Black rights, pro-women rights, pro-LGBTQ plus rights, pro-Native American rights, you also have to be part of this intersectional group of being anti-Israel. So there's a lot of social pressure of, be a part of us against Israel in order for you to get your social status. And the last thing, which I think is the biggest thing, is a reaction to trauma. Now, this is why I don't call Jews that become anti-Israel people that are self-hating. I say internalized anti-Semitism, because let's give the example of a woman that is in an abusive relationship with a husband, and that husband is beating her. Now, there are three ways in which a woman can react to such a situation. The first is fighting back and removing herself from that situation and saying, I will not accept to be treated this way, which is what I think everyone should do when faced with trauma. The second way to react is to make excuses and ignore the problem. Oh, it was just one time. Oh, it was okay. It was just drunk. It's not that big of a deal. It's okay. Oh, to make excuses for it. And the third, which I find the worst, is to blame yourself for it and say, no, it's my fault. I should have done this, or no, I should have done that instead. No, it was my fault. And let's apply that reaction to trauma to anti-Semitism of the collective, the Jewish people. There are some Jews that fight back and stand up and don't put up with it and remove themselves from the situation. So even leave their diasporic group or wherever they're living because they just won't put up with it anymore. There are most Jews in the diaspora that make excuses for it. Whatever, it's over there. They're just talking. Let them say what they have to say. It'll just go away. If you do something, it'll just go worse, which is unfortunately my experience of most Jews in the diaspora. And then you have Jews that blame themselves and say, no, it's my fault. It's our fault. It's us that did it. And it's not because they hate themselves. Like a woman that's blaming herself for the abuse she's receiving from her husband is not a self-hating woman. You see a woman like that, you don't reject her. You feel for her. You want to help her. You have to guide her through that trauma for her to come out of it because there's something horrible happening. So us as Jews, when we see other Jews that are, so traumatized and bear this generational trauma of getting to conclusions of being anti their own people, we can't reject them. We can't hate them. We have to help them, especially as the Jews that went through the first process of being able to rise above the pain and the trauma to be able to fight against it in order to prevent it from happening. And so that's what I think that the 6 reasons out there, and it can be a collection of all of them for different people that cause people to be disconnected from their identity and turn against their own collective.
That's a pretty amazing explanation. That's brilliant.
Very nice. And I think that you're very right in that connecting these people back that's the trick, because at the end of the day, if we ostracize them and if we push them aside and if we don't listen to their voice and listen to what they're saying, then we're going to lose them at the end of the day. They're not going to want to be part of Am Israel and what's going on over here, and I think it's a real shame. One of the things that I found listening to some of your conversations is, and I want to focus on this specific one, is the misinformation and what can we do to fight some of the things like I've heard about Jews or Israelis, Rudy. To be honest, I don't want to repeat them on here right now because they're so ridiculous. They're so ridiculous. They're so outlandish that they're not even worth speaking about. And I've even heard in some podcasts where Israeli or Jewish activists will have somebody on who, quite frankly, I mean, it's just pure anti-Semitism, the stuff that is coming out of their mouths, and none of it is basically true, and that they're just misleading viewers. What can we do as a collective, and what can we do individually to kind of fight this misinformation that there is out there and these kind of ridiculous notions that Jews control the world and that there wasn't a Holocaust and these kind of ridiculous things that are out there?
Yeah. So something we need to notice historically is that anti-Semitism has never been spread by saying something logical or something that makes sense, right? That the Jews are, using the blood of Christian children for matzah, or poisoning the wells during the Black Plague, or responsible for the economic crash post World War I, causing, Germany to go down. That the Jews are. It doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't make sense now. It didn't make sense then. So we can't rationalize why there's these ideas of hatred against us. But what we do need to do is we need to spread light where there's darkness. So there's misinformation. We need to have better information. We need to make content, whether that's on social media, on videos, movies, so on, that shifts the way that the culture sees things. Because rights are not granted; they're earned. So if we look at another community, such as the African American, Black, people of color in the US, if we go back 80, 90, 100 years ago, even earlier than that or later than that, they didn't have rights in America, right? And there's still many struggles that they're going through within different societies. But let's take, for example, then they didn't have equal rights. They couldn't vote. They couldn't go to the same schools. They couldn't go to the same places, the same water fountains, the same bus place, like spots. There was a lot of things that they were going through. Today, that's not a reality. So how have they gone from point A to point B? And there's still plenty to go to get to point C, which is where we should all be. But how do we go from point A to point B? Well, people stood up, people fought, people started to shift the culture. People even died for, the freeing Black rights, including Jews. Jews died to help save Black people. Many Black people that were activists also died. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. People stood up and shifted the culture. Now, when you shift the culture, especially the youth, the younger generation, the youth is what is eventually going to be the representation of those that will eventually be in power. So either you change a society for the people to desire a change, and then the politicians have to create that change because they want to get elected and they have to do what the people want, or you're doing it more long term, or you're shifting the mentality of the younger generation for the future politicians anyways are going to have that mindset because we made the moves now to shift from the bottom up the way people see the world. And so if we want to be respected, we have to stop expecting it. We have to start earning it. We have to start standing up for ourselves. When you go to a college campus and you hear someone saying something racist, not that this happens almost ever, but let's say it were to happen, that student would automatically get ostracized. The student union would probably write a letter against them. They would probably lose their friends. And it's normal because there are social consequences to freedom of speech. You can't just have freedom of speech that you say what you want, but there's not going to be consequences of the same freedom of speech back to you of people not wanting to associate with you. And so why is it that that's the reaction that exists, where everyone stands up against racism, everyone stands up against sexism, everyone stands up against homophobia, everyone stands up against these xenophobic movements against minorities, but when it comes to hatred against Jews, everyone is silent because the Jews themselves don't stand for themselves. It starts with that own community being able to lead their own movement, being able to create coalitions, being able to get the society to recognize what is right and what is wrong, what is anti-Semitic, what is not. How do you respect us? You better respect us, because if not, there are consequences. And we need to be able to get there and to shift that. And I think there's a lot of ways to do that, from the top level to the bottom level. And we need to start being able to do that in order to change things.
I 100% agree with you there, Rudy. And I think if we look at kind of current affairs and stuff that is going on at the moment, we kind of need to take what you're saying and put it into action with regards to Sarah Halimi. I'm sure you're well aware of
Absolutely.
The case. Yeah. And I think that there's something that we all have to do collectively to get this murderer convicted, because even though it's the French government, right, and we don't have any influence over there, I'm not French, but for somebody to get off murdering somebody so horrifically because of smoking cannabis or something like that, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, to be honest with you. And I think we all need to be fighting for her and her family, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. There has to be justice served. I hope it will be, no matter how it will be. And I think that the French society should rise up and to be against this. And if they're not, we have to make the French society feel the pain of what happens when you don't respect Jews. We have to protest. We have to show them how they're wrong, the same way other communities protested when there was injustice happening to their own community. We have to build coalitions. I think it's very important for the Muslim world to stand up against this, because he did do this in the name of Allah as a Muslim. This does not represent Muslims at all. All of us here know many Muslims, have many Muslim friends, appreciate and even respect Islam, and this does not represent it. But since he did it in the name of Islam, I think many Muslim leaders around the world should be actively condemning this act, not only for him to be convicted, but for other people that are Muslim that may have these bad ideas, or any other individual, for them to know that this is not Islam, and this is not something that's any human being should be doing, targeting and murdering an innocent elderly woman, let alone any person, just because that they're Jewish.
Absolutely.
100% agree. 100% agree with you there.
But at some point, we must have started just letting ourselves be walked all over, because we're not a large nation. We don't constitute a large percentage of the world's population, and yet we've somehow managed to survive through persecution for a couple thousand years. And I don't know how we could possibly have done that if we were always just, ducking our heads and, running for cover and trying to ignore everything. Like you look at Masada, thousands of years ago, we obviously stood up for ourselves then. And maybe, I don't know, that's obviously not the last time a Jew stood up for themselves, but it seems like there's been a drop-off in recent history where we stopped standing up for our identity.
I think the Roman Empire beat the warrior out of us, put us down, and I think Masada was really the last stand to fight. There were other moments. You had the partisans during the Holocaust. You had the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, but that was already too late, and that was very minimal. That doesn't mean you don't have strong Jews. Clearly, us three are strong Jews. You always have strong Jews in society, but it's our responsibility to get the collective to be like that, and to undo, the trauma that we've experienced and the sort of colonization that we went through. Even, you look at the leaders, spiritual leaders, the rabbis, the council, the all these things during the Roman Empire in Judea were appointed by the Roman Empire. So you didn't have the true Jewish leaders. You had the puppets of the Roman Empire, and the descendants of our leadership have always been the descendants of the same type of mentality, that we must live under the thumb of a greater power. And we must respect that greater power no matter what. And we must put our heads down, and we must pay our taxes and live in our little shuttles. And we have to break out of that shuttle mindset. I don't want any Jew living under the thumb of anyone else. I don't think any human being should be living under the thumb of anyone else. We should be free individuals. We should be a free people. And when people think of a Jew, they think of not only a strong warrior, man or woman, but also an amazing human being deep inside. So strong, not only physically, but with your intentions, with your values, with who you are. And that's what I want the image of people to have when they think of a Jew, because that's truly who we are and who we need to try to strive to come back as a collective. There are many videos coming out recently of Jews being attacked in New York, for example, of Orthodox Jews being attacked. And you look at these videos and it's like, what are you doing? Why are you running away? That person is attacking your wife and your kid, and you're running away. That's not what a Jew should be like. I understand that it's hard to judge a person that hasn't been trained, that hasn't been ready, and it's not their fault. But the question is, how can our generation now be able to understand that this is something that we're going to keep dealing with until we solve the problem? And by solving our problem, it's not only by fighting them, it's by empowering us. We can't always be the counter movement to the counter movement. We have to be able to take our own movement and lift it up and make the counter movement irrelevant.
Absolutely.
For sure. I agree with that completely, and I think that, part of empowering the diasporan Jews is definitely giving them some type of training and giving them some type of skills that will give them the ability to combat any kind of attackers that are out there. You mentioned New York. We've also seen attacks in London, Rudy, against ultra.
Even in Jerusalem.
Even in Jerusalem. I mean, this kind of, that's actually leading on to my next question. You did mention TikTok and this younger generation and the kind of things that are happening on there, and the younger kind of social media gen. I guess it can be used for good and bad, though, as we're seeing, because these videos that are coming out on TikTok are horrific, to be honest with you. it's childish and it's kind of catching on. So TikTok can be used in one sense to really highlight certain issues and protest and do good things, but then on the other hand, it can just can show the worst of us, really. What can we do?
I think it's a symptom.
Yeah.
I think it's a symptom of the deeper societal problems, and it's being put in our face. And so the initial reaction is like, oh my God, this is a horrible platform where all these bad ideas are being spread. But we have to realize that these are the ideas that actually exist. And we're not in those conversations, and we're not actually learning what people think. And so we don't know. And now we're seeing it. We're thinking this is brand new. This is already what people think. So this is just showing us to our face what is the problem. And in order to change it, we have to go deeper than just, getting the channel to ban certain content, which I also think should be done. But we need to be able to solve the deeper problem of why people have these ideas about Jews and how we can change those ideas and minimize hatred and spread light. And that's the issue that we need to face. Less react. And again, it's all about counter. And instead of doing that, we need to be able to empower our own side so that the other is just unimportant. So you won't see a lot of racism on TikTok. You'll see it because there's always hatred that exists for every community, but it's not something that's popular. It's not something that's celebrated. It's not something that will come without social consequences. We have to get anti-Semitism to be on a level as well that is recognized by the world and rejected by the world, and that's the real work that we need to do.
I completely agree with you there, Rudy. And I think that if we can fight on all these kind of fronts and fight against anti-Semitism, and then at the same time strengthen our connection with these lost tribes, as well as you're talking about out in Africa, and all these kind of diasporan Jews that are out there, I think the next decade or two can look so positive for Israel. And I think it will just take, another big push from people like yourself and people that are out there trying to make things happen to get our Palestinian cousins to come to the table and hash something out. I'm at the point where I'm very agnostic when it comes to the solution, whether it be one state, 2 states, 3 states, no state. I'm open to anything that will work on the ground for both peoples. And I think that's kind of going to be our next challenge, or if you like, our generation's challenge, Rudy, in the next couple of decades, as soon as we can move forward here. Just for closing, I was wondering, Rudy, where do you see yourself, in the next few years with the work that you're doing, and what are your kind of plans? Where can you see yourself going?
Well, Bezat Hashem, still in Jerusalem with a wife and several children. That's my plan. That's what I want to be certain. The rest is depending on how the world looks like.
Fantastic answer. Yeah.
Bezat Hashem.
Sure. One person has just commented here something. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. And I think that's very true. We can be critics of Israel and of certain policies and certain things that are going on without it being anti-Semitism. Of course, there is a line that people tend to cross there and take it from criticism over into anti-Semitism, and that's something that we need to definitely fight against.
I don't know one person in Israel that doesn't criticize Israel.
Exactly.
So,
you do it better than anybody else.
let's put it there, but if you're criticizing to uplift and to change the problems, then that's welcomed. We need to have more criticism of things that are wrong to make things better. But if you're trying to delegitimize, dehumanize, or hold double standards, that's not criticism. So I think a big problem is oftentimes people are using things that are anti-Semitic and calling that criticism. That's what's not criticism. It's not that criticism is anti-Semitic, because it is not. It's what you're saying or doing is not criticism. If you're delegitimizing, dehumanizing, holding double standards, or even minimizing our stories and our struggles and our identity and who we are and our right to exist in the whole situation here, and using suffering of one side to pin against the other and to use it as political ammunition to create a zero-sum game, then you're not actually solving the problem. You are a part of the problem.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure, Rudy.
There you go.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Rudy. We're going to wrap it up. I just really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your views with us and some of your upcoming projects. I'll definitely be following along to see how your trip goes to Africa and stuff like that. It's going to be very interesting. So yeah, good luck with all your upcoming projects. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, and good luck to you.
And come back whenever you want, whenever we can arrange for you to do it again. It was a fantastic episode.
Keep creating content to help enlighten the world.
Yeah.
Inshallah, Habibi, inshallah. We'll get there.
Yeah, lucky.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Bye for now.
Yeah.